have Ukrainian forces pushed the Russians all the way back to basically square one in Bakhmut. But is Russia trying to continue its efforts to encircle Bakhmut and having more success? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is December 23rd, 2022. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first off, we need to look at the control map, and as you guys can see, first off, within Bakhmut, we're going to look at a blown up map from War Mapper on Twitter. But as you guys can see, even this marginal last tiny foothold that the Russians are trying to take west of the reservoir here has more or less failed. They control none of these urban blocks, and they really do lack a foothold to cross this bridge here. As long as Ukrainian forces are able to occupy positions in this block, of course, they are completely denying the Russians' use of this crossing here. And of course, they fully control this entire crossing to the north, meaning that, again, if Russians have any designs on this block whatsoever, they have their work cut out for them. You can see here that it still assesses that this wood line is contested, with Ukrainian forces occupying the majority. Now, here's where things get a little more interesting today, is that you can see, obviously, we talked about the retreat to the east here, but the enemy, the Russians have advanced near Soledar. We've talked about this at some length, that they need to take this town of Bakhmutsky in order to kind of creep their way up into Soledar. If they can hold Soledar, right, it represents a pretty important thoroughfare into Bakhmut from the north. If they can capture Soledar and Blahudatne, Ukrainian forces will at least lose one of the major avenues, leading into Bakhmut. But as we've talked about, as long as they control this key highway here, as well as this road into Chasiv Yar, neither of which are under any significant Russian threat, their ability to resupply and re-equip Bakhmut defenders is going to remain pretty intact. I think Russia's ultimate goal would be to create an encircling cauldron around Bakhmut, but the terrain is just so much less forgiving for it. When we look to the north, right, you guys can see that Russians who have controlled Yakovlivka made what looks like a fairly strong advance, probably mechanized given the amount of territory covered. We're looking at 3 or 4 kilometers of terrain seized. In an effort probably to push, again, to attempt to encircle Soledar. I think probably they're trying to seize this Vasile, something we've discussed, that they really need to control these outlying villages in order to apply pressure to Soledar and Bahudatne, which in turn will, of course, really facilitate the surrounding of Bakhmut itself. When we look at the tactical map, we can see that Russian ground assaults have been light by Russian standards. Of course, there's some to the south of Bakhmut. This attack effort here, which we just saw ended in actually Russians being pushed back behind previously held territory. And of course, their effort to push forward towards Soledar from Bakhmutsky. This doesn't yet reflect the realities in Yakovlivka, which you guys can see here would involve probably extending to about this point. So a significant salient, but as you guys know from this channel, salients don't last long. And if there's Ukrainian forces continuing to fight in Vasile and Soledar, this Russians, part of this salient here, have their work cut out for them, right? They'll presumably be Ukrainian forces opposing them to the front, to the side, and to the other side. So Russia would need to either continue its advance or this salient is going to get ground down. They're going to be too exposed and they'll have to retreat back to Yakovlivka. I sort of suspect that Russia may have a tougher time consolidating these gains simply because the terrain is so very unfavorable. You guys can see it's swampy. Where there are rivers, you can be reasonably certain that's lowlands, right? Because that's where rains are going to consolidate. So what they've done is advanced on some of the lowest territories. They're surrounded on all sides, I would suspect, by Ukrainian forces in elevated positions. So while this probably briefs really well to the higher-ups that they've seized a big chunk of territory. Maybe they even believe it to be a breakthrough. The terrain sort of says otherwise. The terrain says that this may transition to becoming a Ukrainian shooting gallery here shortly. Now, when we look at Bakhmut, we can see that in the more granular details, that yes, this map actually assesses as of midnight last night, UTC, I think that's Greenwich Mean Time, that the Ukrainian forces, in fact, denied Russians any access to any of the urban developed areas in Bakhmut and have pushed them out of the forest here to the north, right? This is, of course, great because, as you guys can see, let's bring up this map here. This forest, as you know, in this conflict, forests offer tremendous tactical advantages. They provide overhead cover. The trees, even destroyed trees, provide great raw materials to improve a fighting position. And so if they occupy this area for a long time, they can become better concealed, build improved fighting positions, and really become just tougher and tougher to dislodge. So seeing the Russians pushed out already is a tremendous victory. Not tremendous, but it's a substantial and tactically significant victory for the Ukrainians, who are attempting to maintain this forest as a defensive position to prevent Russians from pushing into the heart of Bakhmut. So all in all, good news for the Ukrainians. Guys, I just want to point out one thing. Of course, if you want access to my uncensored combat video breakdowns, the breakdowns of the videos YouTube definitely won't let me show you. You want to become a member of the Patreon. The new video is dropping today. So thanks so much to my Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys are the ones who make this whole thing possible for me. The link is in the description, and I will see all you guys tomorrow.